I think that's where AI is. It'll help you overcome that rat's nest and go straight to the solution. That's my opinion. I think that's where the wealth is, right? Finding those areas where you can skip over the morass of pain and go straight to a solution is much, much better.
Welcome to the Deep Specialization Podcast, the show where we blend focus, strategy, and client intimacy in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm your host, Corey Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to the Deep Specialization Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a repeat visitor, Stewart Gandolf. Stewart is the CEO and founder of Healthcare Success, a leading agency in the healthcare space. Today, we're going to talk all about what it's like to run an agency in the world of AI, this emergence of AI. So can't wait for us to jump into the conversation. Stewart, welcome back to the show.
Corey, good to be here again, my friend. This is going to be fun. I just know it. And I hope your listeners agree. So we'll see. But I think it's going to be fun.
So where should we jump off? I have a bunch of questions, but wanted to see, what makes sense for you. Like maybe you could just share with us, kind of state of the union as it relates to your agency or the world of healthcare marketing and this emergence of AI. So what's going on in your world?
It's so much, Corey, that to give you an idea, in the last 3 phone calls I had prior to this were all about AI and innovation. All 3 calls were with different vendors, internal meetings, new solutions. Really, I don't know about every call today, but the last 3 calls, all of them meaty, all of them important, were about AI in one form or another. So let me kind of set the table a little bit, and then we'll jump into whatever questions you have. So, obviously AI, by the end of last year, we'd go to conferences and a lot of sessions were about AI, and marketers they had the right idea. They knew that this was an important topic. And it was kind of like, how do you spell AI, right? Like they were looking at the most basic fundamental things. And, I was among them too, right? Like I always like being innovative. It's part of my shtick. I was joking a minute ago before we started, I'm crappy at a lot of things, but a couple of things I'm good at. And being innovative and being at these kinds of things, I think I'm probably a little bit better than average. But terrible at basketball, but good at this. So anyway, I'd rather be good at basketball, but okay. So, at the most basic function, and a lot of people ask me about this, although it's not as big a deal as you would think. You would think that clients would say, what am I paying for now that your writing is all being done by AI or your art's I don't get that at all. We'd probably have had that comment, but it's never made its way to me. But that is like the sort of level 1 to me of like, okay, we're going to do copywriting with AI, kind of try to cheat clients, cheat the search engines. We never really had that philosophy ever and never will. But it's interesting. That doesn't mean AI is not a tool for those basic functions, right? So with our writing team, we're like, ideas generation, awesome. Doing quick competitive reviews, looking for content gap analysis with SEO. These are all things that AI can be applied to. So I guess my first bit of advice on the writing side, don't try to fool Google and the LLMs by putting out a bunch of AI drivel because that specifically won't work. And in some cases, you can get penalized. It's interesting. Only about maybe 6-8 months ago, Google said, we don't mind AI. It basically said AI by content is not necessarily bad. It just has to be good. Then later they reversed that and they don't want AI content. So I think they wanted to kill the incentive for that. And then the funny thing is about reading content is you have the large language models reading other large language model AI. So it's like the shark is eating itself, right? Like it's like, wait, there's no human here at all. It's got its own thing. So I think that basic level though of, okay, can I use it for idea generation? Use it for, topics? That's all cool. Since I'm on this topic, I'm going to drill on this just for a second. So like, for example, Corey, with my own podcast, I like to write my own descriptions, my own bio. But when I have a guest that I'm not really sure where to start because I'm interviewing, but I haven't met them, I'm not sure where I want to go. I'll ask my premium version of Perplexity. This is, as a reminder, this is my podcast. This is who I'm interviewing. This is a link to his book. Give me some sample questions for the interview. And man, out of like the 20 or so I'll get, maybe 6 or 7 would be ones that I would have thought of eventually, and 2 or 3 that are really good that I may not have thought of. So like that's the kind of a power of a tool where I'm not doing anything unethical. I'm just moving faster to get good content.
I love it. So have you tried? So I do a lot of interviewing, and certainly AI has helped with being able to do great research at scale much faster.
For sure.
Have you tried the Google Notebook LM tool?
No, I've heard about that. I just haven't gotten to it yet. So it's on the list with everything else, but I've heard it's great. For the listeners, tell them what that is and remind me, because I know I've been told to do it.
So what it is, I'll tell you what I use it for and how I use it specifically, and then I can share some other ideas. So when I'm researching, I interview a lot of business owners. And in many cases, I'm not the first podcast they've ever been on. It's probably true that they've been on a couple other podcasts.
Right.
And so what I do is I go to YouTube and I search for their name, podcast guest. So Stewart Gandolf, podcast guest. And up will come previous episodes of podcasts where my future guest has been guest on someone else's podcast.
That's brilliant.
So what I do is I copy the URL for all of those videos, like 3 to 4, not all maybe, but like 3 to 4. And then I drop them into Google LM, Google Notebook LM. And of course, what it can do is it can pull the whole transcript of all the videos, combine them all. And what I do is I say, I'm going to be interviewing Stewart on my podcast called Deep Specialization. And my target audience is agency founders who are looking to scale and specialize. And based on the sources provided, develop an intro as well as thought-provoking questions I could ask Stewart that would really be beneficial to my audience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll do is it'll look through all those transcripts. You can also give it your the websites and documents and anything else, feed a bunch of good stuff in there. And then it comes out back with a lot of really good questions.
I love it. So just 2 other ideas since we're on this topic. So we use Fathom when I'm recording. I usually use Zoom. I know you're using Riverside, which is probably better, but we use Zoom and use that in a good way, just to make it as easy as possible on our guest. And so, but using Fathom with that gives the writer who's going to summarize the meeting at least a place to start. Now, as a good host, you need to go back and check because sometimes like she may miss the point if she's relying too heavily on that. And she's a great writer, by the way. But like we had one with my friend Mark Tager and the machine picked up like a sidebar and made that into the topic. Like, that's not what this is about. So we had to go back and still be a human. But, to catch a lot of little stuff, to organize it, especially, and for those of you that are, thinking about doing more podcasts, having good questions really helps unless you've got really experienced guests because it gives you like kind of a beginning, middle, and end and a point. So it's really helpful for that. And the other part of it is this is fun. So, we're rewriting our podcast pages on our website. And just for fun, I said, what is our editorial mission? And I put in our link. And Corey, it was amazing how close it was to our editorial mission based upon the kind of topics I'd covered in reviewing our previous podcast. It's insane. So anyway, the writing side is cool. The art side, it's funny. I saw this funny meme. If you need it, I can go back and find it on LinkedIn. It's like, how did you know this is being AI generated? It had like these little circles of like what might be a clue. And then our hands were feet. Like, okay, maybe that's AI generated. So that was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. So the idea of we, at least for our agency, have used it for little things like background dropouts and things like that, but not really in a very material way. I know there's other tools out there that are better. We do things very custom the way we're doing things. But like where I see that being more valuable is just resizing, right? We come up with a good concept and resizing it for programmatic and all these other sites. It could be a helpful there. So it's probably being used better in other categories. I should add that before I get to the crescendo here, the big stuff I think is more fun, and we can take your questions, is I have something called AI and Innovation Club we do with our team every single month. And that is like, the cool thing about that, we have about 40 people on our team full time, and mostly employees and a few freelancers. And what I find is the ones that tend to be the most innovative, the most thought leading, they attend every time, right? The ones that, they just show themselves by being interested in this. And so we call it AI and Innovation Club on purpose because it's about AI usually, but really it's more about innovation. So it doesn't have to be about AI. It could be anything innovative. And Corey, the conversation every time is completely different. It's not the same rehash of stuff. Every time it's like, ooh, I saw this. Ooh, I tried this. Ooh, this worked out. So that's something any company could do. And it's completely voluntary. And it's certainly worth the 45 minutes we invest in that every time. So if you like that idea, you can do it.
Yeah, no, I like the idea. Can I ask a kind of a follow-up question on that? So who is the right person in the organization to own that club? Let's just say that effort of kind of celebrating and exploring innovation within the organization.
That's a great question. So for good and ill, agencies often reflect their owner, right? Their strengths and weaknesses. So when we started, I've always just, to me, change is fun. I jump off the roof and figure out how to fly on the way down. That's my nerves. But that causes chaos in an agency. Like when you're little. I was going to
say, your employees love you.
Yeah, when you're little, you can do that. Well, that's your whole shtick, Corey. You're talking about specialization, and you're right? All the way sadly, you weren't around when I was learning how to do this. So I just figured out by failing over and over and over again what didn't work. So that doesn't work. If you're scaling an agency, you need processes, you need systems or whatever. But I still love innovation. And so I nominated myself to do that. I mean, it was my idea to do the club, right? So by nature, I do it. But if it's not the CEO of your business and maybe your CEO doesning have time, I think this thing is somebody who's passionate about learning and what's new. And like our head of digital services, Brandon, he's like that too. He and I are both in this sort of double secret agent club where we just like geek out over this stuff all the time. And he's more technical than I am by far. And you could always invite him back for a meeting sometime if you want to go with what's possible out there. But, we just have that nature. There's several people on our team that could do it. And if I ever stepped aside from this, I know I have other people. But I think it's that hunger, that thirst for doing things better. And, going back to what we could do differently. Like if if I'm critiquing our own AI innovation club, we could be spending more of our time innovating new systems, right? Focusing on that versus just the sexy, bright, shiny objects that I've been known to focus in on. That mundane stuff every day.
Yeah, well, and the world's changing so fast. There is value in talking about the shiny stuff because that could become the new thing.
So let's talk about that. Okay, so I don't usually wait so long to get to my main point, so I apologize for that, but we're having fun along the way. But here's my main point if I was to give anybody a takeaway, and I've been doing this now for a couple decades plus. I've been doing this for a while, and I would say that the times I remember being really excited about like what I do was like when I first learned what Blend is up. That was fun. Paid search and SEO was amazing. Like we founded our company around 2006. We weren't, bleeding edge, but we were doing content marketing before that term was commonly adopted, right? We were doing I've been doing that for years in the analog world. So like figuring out SEO, paid search, that was so transformative. I think AI right now is at least as big. It's so huge because it empowers all these other things we've been doing now. It's a huge disruptor. And I feel like the great news is and the bad news is that, not everybody's going to survive. Like it's not ideal. So I think it's really, really disruptive. And so we're talking about, like I would recommend if you're an agency owner to be thinking about what does this mean for us long term? It's not a tactic. It's not like, okay, I can do my copy a little faster. It's like, how is that going to transform our whole business? And so that's a thing. And then I would also say for us, the two things we're most excited about, Corey, number one is call tracking. So far in our world, in the world of healthcare, we work with larger entities. We don't work with really individual doctors, though we did years ago. We work with multi-location specialty practices. We work with, health systems and hospitals. We work with SaaS, device, pharma, telehealth a lot. But generally, anytime we're working with a provider, they're, how do I put this nicely? Subpar at answering their phones, usually. Sometimes just they get an F. Oftentimes they get an F. Once in a while we get A's and B's, but I can count them on one hand that I can remember. It's really rare. So the whole thing about, if you could imagine as and some of your agency owners, I'm sure can relate, whatever their vertical, you send clients 700 calls a month and they claim none of them are good clients because nobody converted. That's not what's really going on. So call tracking has been around for a long time, but AI assisted call tracking can prove that whether that was a new caller or repeat caller, whether that person made an appointment or not, whether that person was handled well by the front office, whether that person, individually, how's that office doing? How is that operator doing? That data is amazing. And I believe, Corey, that's going to change our business fundamentally because it'll prove, like we would before sample calls, we might take 50 or 100. And by the time we got back to the client with that, weeks have passed. And, it's more of a difficult discussion. And now you're reacting versus real time. When you first onboard a client, imagine telling them the first week, by the way, your phone sucked. Let's triage that. Like, that's amazing because I can't think of any client that listened to more than a handful of the thousands of calls we generated them. They just don't do it. So I think that's fantastic. So before I go on, I wonder if you have some comments or questions on that particular topic.
So how I'm thinking about that, I mean, it's a classic dilemma around the agency space, especially when you're serving businesses that are, let's call it service-based businesses that have some form of an intake where they're paying an agency. The agency is doing what they believe is excellent work. They're sending in, doing campaigns, which are resulting in high quality leads. But then, of course, the client drops the ball for whatever reason, whether it's obviously good intent, but they're not sophisticated. They don't have a system. They don't know how to track it, and that's just not their core competency. Of course, who's stuck holding the bag is the agency because that's where they're spending all the money with. So I love this, and I love the fact that you can use AI to take 100% sample of the call, be able to basically take away any doubt of where let's call it the bottleneck is in the value chain. In other words, it's not the leads now, because we've proven that out based on all the clear data here, but the opportunity to improve is one step deeper into the sales funnel. So does that mean then that agencies need to get into the intake business?
I think so. I mean, so like this world is merging. And so I'm going to talk about another topic in a moment that's perhaps even bigger. But just for that technology now, let's presume that you have to have calls answered by humans. So, there's really basically two different models in our world. You have either a call center or they're being sent out to the individual offices. As you might imagine, the individual offices are even more scary because it's really hard to control people what's happening at the phone, right? And as a patient, you've experienced that, right? Doctor's office, please hold. They never come back, Corey. They never come back. So meanwhile, like healthcare has embraced consumerism last, like probably dead last. Not very long ago, I tell doctors or administrators about, patient experience. And I've spoken on this topic at major conferences, like patient experience. I don't care if they like me. I just get them better. Like the arrogance behind that comment is like pretty overwhelming. But so it's come a long way since then, but still, customer service and patient experience for most organizations, not all, is not like even a primary goal, let alone the primary goal. So usually it's really more set up around systems. So what's cool though is as patient experience and healthcare consumerism becomes more and more important, you'll see now, like for example, and there's also reimbursement issues associated with this, being able to raise their scores and their way they handle calls. So that means that you care a lot more about reviews. And what is the number one cause of bad reviews? Typically, from the research I've seen, the phones and the sign-up process. So as you start improving this, not only is your marketing getting better, your customer service experience is getting better. So it's kind of like a win-win-win. Everybody's happier. And then what's also happening, Corey, is like in our world, you have different categories of players. You have CRMs. You have, people call them EHRs or EMRs, but they're really practice management platforms. The EHR, EMR is really about the medical records themselves. The practice management platform is all the other business stuff in the practice. So you've got a CRM or not. You've got a practice management platform or not. You've got a reputation management platform or not. A texting and patient communication portal to be able to text or SMS or whatever, chat. Then you have online scheduling. Then you have phone. Like all these different technologies, right? And so what's happening is everybody wants a piece of the pie. So there's a land rush to see what's this going to shake out. The amazing thing is in our world is how like these practice management platforms are generally just average at any of these functions. So you have this sea of third-party platforms that all have to sort of bolt on and play well with each other. So that's another part of this. So I would argue that in our industry and probably most industries, AI isn't directly changing the rules of the game, but it's also accelerating change in related tech. And so that's another reason why it's such an exciting time, because it's going to get better. I mean, no, I'm just saying like scheduling a damn appointment online, right? It's like you still have whole businesses that refuse to do that. And every survey shows patients want to do that. And steadfastly, they don't want to.
Yeah. UCLA, where I go, doesn't do that. So, but given all this context, all these different platforms, is it then therefore the future of healthcare success, your agency as well as others, that maybe are you evolving more into like a systems integrator?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So this year, I told our head of digital that this is a transformative year with us. We've always been good at tech. We've always been, sort of, I don't know if we were bleeding edge, but we're always kind of good at it, but because it's just our philosophy. But I felt at the beginning of this year, really at the end of last year, that this is going to be transformative. And it's difficult because what you know today will not be true anymore about that vendor in 3 to 6 months. It's a real challenge, because the vendors are all changing and a lot of them are claiming stuff they can't actually do yet. So, how do you pick the right horse when all the horses are evolving and growing in front of you and changing and you can't watch them all? You can't have perfect knowledge. So I would say, as our agency, like when we, and fortunately we're of size big enough. There's no secret here, Corey. I've been called by, private equity and strategic investors wanting to buy us since like mid 2000s, certainly around 2017, 18, it really picked up. And, so some of the people that are interested in partnering with us someday look at us as an agency. Others look at us as a tech-enabled healthcare services company, which I think is really intriguing. It's a whole different class. And we can check those boxes on both. So I think a company imperative. And this is challenging given your model, and it's really challenging given our business to do that, right? Like ideally, and I love your specialization audience and the principles, and I follow the stuff you do. And, again, if only I know you so many years ago, but this really does fit with your philosophy too. Like we want to have a best in class platform for call tracking, for patient signups, for all these things. That way, when clients come to us, we will have a credible case why they should change, meaning that they'll be better served by our team. And we're not trying to learn 100 different technologies, most of which don't work. So there's a lot of upfront work for us to do that because, we're vetting kind of everything that touches us. And there's like each of those platforms are different, but identifying it, our preferred provider and maybe a backup provider for each of those, I think is really critical. And nobody wants to pay us for that, right? That's all part of an investment of being in a business. But if you don't do it, you're going to be lost. And I think your former employer, Scopian, was really prescient at this, right? They did that from the beginning. Everything was built to scale. And, belatedly, we were going there. We're more integrated, so we have a different business model. But the more we can get towards scale, the better. And so by mastering these technologies, having so for example, I won't name the call tracking platform, but a lot of people in the space come to us already with one that we're like, oh God, not that one again. So, but our team just sucks it up. So now they're working with a platform they don't like, they don't know because the client insists. We want to be able to come back to them with a really well built out case why you should switch. And then we'll say, we support this platform, but not this one. Here's why. Hopefully that's helpful to you. I think that's in line though with your philosophy.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, in a way, this kind of redefines the definition of patient acquisition from just straight lead gen to providing a complete solution from, sourcing them from the ether, the web, the out there, and bringing them to be actual real appointment in their calendar.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so that's the sort of holy grail that's pretty achievable in other businesses, but not so much in healthcare broadly, at least not with providers. We do it with other businesses, but providers are tough. I do want to pivot for a second and talk about something that's also exciting that we're also developing, which is AI phone agents, which just answer the calls altogether.
Yeah. What's your experience there?
So that is developing really rapidly. And a major player, ZocDoc, just came out with their own phone agents. So that shows you and we also have another company we're talking to at present, IntelliPeer, which we like a lot. So there's players out there that are doing this. And we are also in the process of choosing who we want to make as a sort of first provider. We're really excited about IntelliPeer as a potential partner. But, again, we're doing the due diligence on all this stuff.
Have you listened to these calls though? Are these calls any good? Like, would you
okay, so this is funny, Corey. Maybe, I don't know, November, October, this little Indian company with about probably 5 people called me and they played me sample calls. I'm like, that is shockingly good. But I can't work with you because I asked them about HIPAA, which in our industry is everything. And they barely knew about it. Like, yep, you're disqualified already. We can't work with you. So I saw them like 4 months later at a big dental conference, and they have already figured that out. And they now have several big dental clients, like multi-location dental groups. So that was crazy how fast they grew and how they've adapted. So that's a challenge though, because there's very little barrier to entry. These companies are riding the rails of other, they're not creating this stuff from scratch. They're writing the technologies that are already out there. So it's how do you know who's going to be around in the long term. For us, it's a critical decision. Like I said, I don't want to reevaluate and change my software every year. And then for us too, we're considering creating proprietary versions of this because what we do is so specialized and so important that, I'm not going to go to those details, but, having a proprietary sort of double version that's available. And all this knowledge adds value, but I think eventually it's going to be table stakes. So it's a little scary, especially if, I remember being smaller when it was just me and my partner and a bookkeeper-ish.
One of the things I learned at Scorpion was that, the riches are in the niches, but the wealth, capital W wealth, are in the systems, right? And Scorpion did a great job of really building systems that removed a lot of the human variability and also dependency on the third-party platforms. Like, when I first got there, I don't know if you remember Marin software, which is used to be an old-timey kind of PPC management thing. They had just ripped it out and they said, we can do it better than Marin. And so we're going to build our own PPC optimization algorithms and tools for our clients, custom built for our situation. That's an example of a system that Scorpion built. And I think although expensive and complicated, requires specialized knowledge to do that well, it does create much more of a significant moat around you from a valuation perspective, as well as one of the things I loved about Scorpion and just admired about what we built was that, because it was all proprietary, it was custom made for the actual situation that we were trying to solve.
So I would bring one thing. I think that's the better way to do it, obviously. But if anybody in the audience is panicking and like slapping their head in their forehead, it is definitely better to do that. But at least integrating the stuff that's already out there is a step forward in valuation. It does matter. So like I told you, people like have continued to whisper in our ear and hopefully will forever until we're ready. But, they ask these people when they're having just sort of friendly conversations, one of the first things they ask about is what's your recurring revenue model? What's your marketing systems? What's your tech stack? And who are your people? Those are the questions people ask.
They want to understand, what is human led versus systems led?
Yeah, for sure. So that's all super important. So I just think it's, to finish that thought, any other questions you have, but that was my main preamble is I feel like it's an exciting time. Oh, another thing that we could talk about for a second is just how search or SEO is changing. So, paid search is changing, but SEO is changing dramatically. And they're trying to figure out and all agree on a new term that takes into account AI overviews and LLMs like ChatGPT and Perplexity. So that's a whole new world. That whole product line needs to change. And, the best people in the industry are thinking about this, right? So I have two of the people that I'm working with very closely are both speaking at PubCon this week in a couple of days. And, we're going and participating in Brighton SEO. Like that's a moving target. Like how do we adapt to this new world? And that's some of the stuff we cover in more detail on our own podcast. So if your audience is interested, they can hear more about that there.
Yeah, go ahead and plug it. What's the name of your podcast?
If you just go to healthcaresuccess.com and navigate over to the podcast, or just put in healthcaresuccess.com/podcast. We cover these kinds of topics all the time. So not really in a pluggy way, but just because if you're really interested in this kind of stuff, we talk about this a lot with various guests who actually are deeper in this than I am, right? I'm the CEO. I can't, Corey, I wish I could get deep. I just can't. I don't have time. I've got to run the business.
Let's talk a little bit about specialization. Like what are your views or perspectives on the fact that, if AI does its job of truly democratizing access to talent and tools, why does vertical specialization still matter?
I think it always matters. I mean, again, like I picked a niche called healthcare, which is huge, right? So, and you've had people on your show that do just dentist. And so that is a little scary if you have just one to me. But, the way that we evolved as a company, and just to help your listeners know, I was so crazy to work with pretty much every medical specialty is because I spent about 10 years on the road teaching practices how to grow their business through marketing back in the 90s and early 2000s. So, we knew nephrology and gastroenterology, as well as ophthalmology and dermatology or whatever. So we could help anybody. So we limited it to healthcare, but it is much harder to scale that way. We did it, but it's hard. So, the niche thing is great. I love some of your philosophies, like, some of the things I've read you read about in your book, which love your book is doing well. But, and also your blog, it's like, maybe thinking about things like what's the opportunity and are they used to spending money and is it deep enough? And maybe having two or three, especially if you're getting into an industry like travel, which can be cyclical. So I think that's all really smart. And, it's like, I talk about this a lot, Corey, to prospective clients. Like our greatest strength is that, we are integrated. We can help them with the whole thing. And our greatest weakness from a selfish point of view is that. Because you have to have all these expensive people. You have to manage all these expensive people. It's much harder to scale. That said, there is an audience that wants to come to us because we're integrated, right? So there are people that maybe on the show that are working with, lots of, say, I don't know, one given doctor or whatever, but then eventually the client wants more of a marketing partner. They can handle their brand. They can handle, everything. And so that's like square in our sweet spot. So the good news is it's definitely a niche, right? We win a lot of business because of that, but the challenge is always managing it and scaling. It's hard. It just takes lots of really smart, expensive people. There's no way around it. It just does. Hopefully that's as honest as I can be about that.
Yeah. No, is there any nuance, let's call it, about healthcare or the work you do that you think AI will struggle with? What parts of the healthcare specialization will AI struggle with?
I think it's really interesting. So I had lunch with a former writer who works in pharma right now. And part of his job is to quality control because the amount of regulatory stuff they have to do is insane. And so as a human, they did like, I forget, 100,000 pages of content and they discovered 200 errors and the client freaked out. So like, that's a lot of quality that you need. So like, that feels like an AI thing could be part of that solution, right? Helping take that human element of trying to review so much data, or at least as a first pass. Like, that's really, really important. I think AI will also, like anything that's mundane, anything that's repetitive, AI is clearly really good at. I feel like the areas you still need to trust, you still need to have people that are managing it. Remember, I talked about that podcast where the AI just missed the point entirely. You can't just trust it. You still need a human. I think also, like in our industry, there's tons of regulation. So there's regulation issues. So you've got to make sure that you're doing that. And I think you also have to do your due diligence because people will tell you they're, like, for example, HIPAA compliant, but how do you really know? And that actually, sadly, for smaller businesses, it does tend to make me want to work with larger businesses because they have something to lose. Like the guys in India I told you about earlier, I love them. They're great. And maybe they're big enough for us to work. But when they were independent like that, they're just too risky for me to work with. So I think that it really is a wild west. I think it will settle down. Everything else in the business history eventually settles down. And eventually, the winners are separated from the losers. And I would just say as in healthcare specifically, maybe I'll leave with this thought. I think in healthcare, there's so many problems that other industries have already solved that AI could help accelerate the growth. And I'll use another metaphor I use with my clients and when I'm speaking to. So I remember reading about this years ago. And back in the day, India, it turns out, I have to go back and fact check this, but I remember this specifically. India was a relatively early adopter with cells. And the reason is cell service. And the reason is their legacy was so bad. It's such a rat's nest, so difficult to untangle. They just sort of skipped over fixing the wires and went straight to cellular. So I think that's where AI is. It'll help you overcome that rat's nest and go straight to the solution. That's my opinion. I think that's where the wealth is, right? Finding those areas where you can skip over the morass of pain and go straight to a solution is much, much better.
So you mentioned there will be winners and there will be losers. What separates the two?
Well, obviously, Corey, I hope that I'm on the winning side of that equation. But we've been able to weather 20 years now. We're at 19 years going on 20. So we've lived with change after change, both internal and external, right? We've had internal changes and disruption and external changes as, people leave and pandemics come and go and recessions and all these things, technology changes. I think it still comes down to, the old Wayne Gretzky metaphor, which everybody talks about, which I hope you actually said about, the players go to where the puck is, I go to where it's going. I think that's really vital. And I think about that a lot. I think about, really basic ideas sometimes. I think about the Wayne Gretzky thing, and I think about 80-20 rule a lot. I remember learning about 80-20, my first class in marketing, and the idea that 20% of the activity yields 80% of the result, that I think about a lot. I love that because, most people don't fully understand that idea, but, just in case somebody who doesn't on this podcast, not just that 20% yields 80% of the results, but within that top 20%, 20% of the 20% yields 80% of the 80%. And roughly about 1% of the cause agent will impact about half the results. So it's been shown in all kinds of life situations, hard science, human relationships. It's a powerful thought. So if, I would encourage other agency owners to think about, okay, where's the puck going and what materially will impact your business? And then also what's realistic, because agency life is hard. Like, when I meet somebody who just wants to start an agency, like, are you sure? It's really, 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 really hard. I mean, Corey, I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. And I know what I'm doing, I like to think, at least.
Yeah, if you only knew.
Yeah, but so like I said, because of my nature of just trying stuff, I did it the hard way. I highly recommend you read Corey's book and go to Corey's workshops and hire Corey, because you can learn it my way over 20 years, or you could hire Corey. I think I would recommend hiring Corey. That was an unrequested plug, but I'm just telling you.
I appreciate that.
It's complicated enough, dude. It's complicated enough.
So thank you for that. That's beautiful. So a couple of final questions before we wrap up here, because we're running short on time. If you were starting healthcare success from scratch today, like an AI native business from day one, what wouldn't exist in the business or in the org chart today?
I think it would be the same functions, but they would be consolidated and restructured with different skill sets. Like I would say, like right now we have, we always have, we're large enough. We've got about 40 people, and which by the way, like in the world of agencies, we're small compared to J. Walter Thompson, but in the world of healthcare marketing agencies, we're pretty big compared to most, at least as far as an independent, right? So we always have people turn over, once in a while, right? We have enough people that's going to happen. So we have somebody we're changing now. Every time we have a new player, we think, does that still make sense, that job description in our new world? And we're going through that right now. And do we want to hire a carbon copy of the person that's leaving? Probably not. So we love our employees, and we're not just going to go change everybody out. But as people come and go, we like to rethink of like what's new and what can we do differently, whether we're doing it through AI or whether we're doing it through. We don't do a lot of outsourcing. We do some. Sometimes we use outsourcing for scaling because, work ebbs and flows for any agency. But, really rethinking the model. But I think we would probably start, when you're starting with an empty page, it is, as overwhelming as it is to start a new agency, it is an incredible opportunity at the same time, because you don't have to worry about appeasing or offending any clients. You don't have to worry about, keeping employees that you like that are no longer a fit. So as challenging it is in some ways, in other ways, it's really liberating. So I would say that I would be thinking a lot about where it's going. I would say going back to, the SEO as that evolves, and I mentioned that we'll talk about that in our own podcast, probably in more detail in the coming weeks and months. I think that's really where the magic is for the digital stuff, right? Like everybody still wants to be seen. The short answer is be everywhere. Like, well, how do you do that, right? So if you watch other thought leaders in this space, be everywhere. That sounds great. How do you get the budget for that? I'm struggling to get a client to spend $5,000 a month. Be everywhere is tough. So you have to think through, okay, and what kind of clients do you want? So hopefully that answers your question. I would, with zero-based thinking, and, actually now that you bring that up, that probably wouldn't be a bad exercise to do anyway, even though it's not what I have. It may reveal some glaring problems. And then another corollary of that, I'm just rolling here, but my job, I don't want to just we're not going to, unless my employees listen to this. We're not planning on firing people and just replacing everybody with AI. Not only would that not work, it's a terrible idea, but we probably will be more selective when we hire. Going forward, we'll think twice. We put out an ad for a position that, this is funny, Corey, you'll get this. I put it on LinkedIn and I forgot to switch it to make them apply directly rather than easy apply. So an hour and a half later, it's like, you have 80 resumes to look at. I'm like, bah! So if you're an employer, don't let easy apply. It's like, oh my God, just no. So anyway, but 80 resumes, we found 4 candidates in an hour and a half that, theoretically could have fit that in an hour and a half. So we had to weed through a lot, but that's crazy.
Just, you mentioned you're being more selective this time. In what ways are you being more selective?
I think first of all, I've learned that I'm only an average interviewer. I told you I suck at a lot of things, right? Interviewing isn't my thing as much. So I tend to I get suckered by charisma easily. So just facts, right? And and the other rumor around the place is Stewart falls in love with everybody at first. Like, okay, maybe that's true. So our team brings a more systematic way of hiring, which I think is absolutely essential. And that's just a weakness of mine. So I rely on my team to create questions in advance. So we have a rule book. It's no longer shooting from the hip, Corey, like Stewart style. Oh, I like them. I'll talk about X. So we have, 8 or 10 imperative questions to ask. We're listening to carefully how they're answering specific questions. Oh, HubSpot just did a series, or in the middle of a series right now. If anybody cares, I can provide you a link to provide on your post on that one. It's really good. And he talks about how he hires in one of those episodes, like, damn it, I wish I'd known that stuff, like their systemology. So I think we're always getting stronger, but that's really important. So I think our process is better now, but I also think what we're looking for, we're more clear. And I think that's also from growing up as an organization. And then, like I said, though, I wouldn't just dust off that job description. I'd really think before you replace somebody, is that still the job we want to hire for today? Is that really the skill set you need?
So last question here as we wrap up. So in the world where clients can generate content and generate strategy briefs with a little bit of talent using AI, where does your agency or other agencies earn trust and margin in 2025 and beyond?
So I think, again, I'm sure that's going to happen more, but we haven't experienced that yet to a big degree, because the kind of clients that wanted to do that before were doing that before anyway. Like we have clients, for example, I can think of one that just uses us for paid search, but on SEO, they've always believed in, content farms to literally go off and hire $50 blogs by somebody who's not even a native speaker just to throw content out. So their religion hasn't changed. And now they're just using AI instead of content farms. So that wasn't really a good client for us anyway. So that said, though, I think it's, again, deep specialization, Corey. I don't know any other way to go, Corey, than to follow your advice in terms of specialization. And maybe my advice would be to get people and get really, really, really good at what you do, to where you can confidently say, we've got best-in-class people on our team. Just getting by with basic stuff you learned 4 years ago will not be, I don't think those companies will survive very well because it's too easy to replace them. They're not adding any value. But, all the stuff you talk about, Corey, and again, I'm not plugging you so much, it's just verifying your experience. But all the stuff you talk about, when we talk to a client in our niches, we really, 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 really know what we're talking about. And that becomes apparent in the first couple minutes. So then it's a lot less about, justifying our right to breathe air. And it's more about, is this a good mutual fit? It's a different positioning entirely. And we really have an equal seat at the table. Like, we're not right for everybody. Not everybody's right for us. So I think the specialization is really, the market's coming to you, Corey, I think, honestly. Because otherwise, how do you defend it? How do you defend, we do a shoe store, we do a bank, we do a massage person. Like, how do you defend that in this age? I don't know how you can.
People want to hire people who understand their specific problems and can demonstrate expertise.
Yep.
Stewart, thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been a fantastic guest. So much wisdom. I've taken a ton of notes here and I've learned a lot. And I anticipate the audience has as well. So
I hope so. This has been fun. I appreciate it, Corey. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Specialization podcast. Are you ready to find out if your agency is built to scale? Take my free 5-minute agency growth score assessment at agencygrowthscore.com. That's agencygrowthscore.com, and get tailored insights across your positioning, marketing, and sales systems. Also, be sure to subscribe for more episodes that help you specialize and scale your sales with dream clients.